Um, well, the notes are passed. It would be funny sometime if one of you said you were opposed to the notes, and we'd have to really go back and dissect them. How about the agenda? Have you looked at the agenda, and would you like to make a motion that we accept the agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved. Oh,
Huh?
second.
That's good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, I think the ayes have it. I didn't see many hands, but I heard a few ayes. So I guess we're going forward. So Eric, do you want to discuss the next things we're going to be doing?
Yeah, so just thanks for everybody for coming tonight. Again, this is a continual working session for the recommendations. And again, here are some brief things if you're about Zoom. The mute, unmute chat icon. Again, the panelists or the SAC members and staff. Time permitting, there may be an opportunity for the members of the public to speak, but this is a working session for the SAC members. As you guys just approved the agenda, again, tonight's essentially just going to be a continuation of the SAC Region 4 strategy discussions, specifically with the new ones that we haven't reviewed yet, starting with the economy, cultural resources, and I believe natural environment are the three topics. But one thing before we get to that is there are no more new recommendations at this time for the SAC to review. You guys have reviewed everything through the SurveyMonkey format. So what we have looked through is we have seen which ones have consensus through the SurveyMonkey, which we've had great response rates. I think we've had of the 3 surveys, I think 2 had 13 respondents and 1 had 12 respondents. So thank you guys very much. And that's out of 15. So thank you guys very much for being involved in completing that for us. It's really helped staff understand which ones we need to bring up to you guys for further discussion. And the ones that have further discussion, there are a total of 21 left. So ideally, we can get through 10 tonight. That's very optimistic given the conversation we had last time. I understand, but we really need to stay on track. Because if we don't stay on track, we are going to have additional meetings. And I kind of right in front of you is our future dates through April. So February 13th, February 27th, March 13th, March 27th, April 10th, and April 24th are guaranteed meetings. Those are Mondays. And as you can see, February 13th, as of right now, will be our last virtual meeting. And then we'll be back in person. And February 27th, we'll be at the Broadneck Library. March 13th, will be at Savannah Park. And then the 27th, again, we'll start alternating again between Broadneck, Savannah Park. And ideally, we're still trying to get a third location. Hopefully, the Riviera Beach Library will open up soon, and we can use that or find a center that's open later for the evenings. But back up a little bit, February 20th and March 6th, they're in red, they're in your face, you can see them right there. Those meetings will be needed if we cannot move through these recommendations. Alternatively, and those are also Monday nights. Alternatively, we could do a Saturday half-day session, but I really don't think anybody wants to give up part of the weekend to really discuss. Now, if I'm wrong, we can absolutely make that happen. That's totally up to you guys. That's the SAC's decision. But right now, given that sheet that we sent out a couple months ago of what days of the week work best for you, Monday was the clear winner, and I wanted to adhere to that as much as possible. So just keep this in mind as we discuss tonight and as we discuss on the 13th, that we really need to make these meeting dates as efficient as possible, unless we want more meeting dates. That being said, discussion is very important, and we all acknowledge that. But please, when you make a comment, please have a productive comment there, and help us and help the group really be able to build off of that. And we're not asking everybody to love every recommendation, right? We're not. That's unreasonable. We understand that there's going to be conversations and people are going to like certain recommendations and dislike others. But what we are asking is, what can we do? What can we write? How can these recommendations be written for you to move from the stop, hold portion to at least the stand aside? Like, what can we do to add to it make you comfortable enough, if the rest of the group is okay with it, that you won't hold that up, kind of thing, right? So again, just please provide productive criticism, productive comments to really help us be able to move forward. And if we can't move forward on recommendation, that's fine. We are still going to be able to move on one way or the other. But it's just, again, time is of the essence, and we want to make this as efficient as possible. And other than that, Anne, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but you're on mute, by the way.
I think to make it move along, we think we're just going to stick with 5 minutes each recommendation, unless we really get in a tangle and we have to come back to one. So let's hope we can get through that. Eric, I was wondering, when the transportation and housing, are we going to take that up again, or?
Correct. Yes, Anne. So thank you. So tonight, again, we're going to talk about the ones we haven't even really discussed as a group yet. The three that I mentioned a minute ago. Ideally, if we get through all those tonight, we'll go right into transportation and then right into the housing. So now it's just kind of like as we go through it, right? So our next meeting, if we could get through the natural environment, cultural resources, and economy tonight, the next meeting would be, again, the remaining transportation and the remaining housing. And we're just going to go down that list until we're finished.
Okay.
So
that wouldn't be an additional meeting, you're not saying?
It depends how we get through this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So we start with the economy.
Can you guys see that on the screen okay with the map and everything?
I had to try to print it out a little bigger for me. I don't know if somebody else can see that, but I made copies of it.
Okay, so the first one is to establish tax increment financing districts, or known as TIFs, in key areas along Ritchie Highway, Mountain Road, and in the commercial revitalization areas to promote infill development and redevelopment, as well as transportation improvements. So this essentially became out of a recommendation because of the topic of how to revitalize certain business areas, certain commercial districts, village centers, and different corridors. And I know one question that we have had is what is a TIF district? And if I pull it up, the TIF district is a public financing mechanism for capturing the future tax benefits of community improvements, such as infrastructure or real estate, in order to pay for these present costs of those improvements. So essentially, these are designated areas that will take taxes in order to help pay for different improvements of that area.
So that means they're relieved of some taxes to be able to pay for the things that are needed. Is that right?
So I'm fuzzy on the exact details, but yes, there are taxes that help go into that that pay for the different improvements required.
And this is Kevin, and I could be wrong, and I'll let someone else speak to correct me, but pretty sure generally TIFs allow, like they would allow the county to capture tax funds and utilize them for things like infrastructure and other things that would help promote development in these areas.
Well, that sounds good. I just know that some people avoid taxes if they're doing a certain kind of project. And I didn't know if we were talking about that, but we're talking about using the taxes to go to enhance that project or make that project happen. Is that right, Kevin?
That's my general understanding, yes.
Christina?
It gets complicated with all these buttons at the bottom, so I apologize. So tax increment financing and districts really look at what the future value of property could be. And they actually take that money and put it into investment in the district. And they can be very, very successful. We do not have them in this county. And I might make a recommendation on here. Instead of establishing tax increment financing districts, you may want to say something like explore establishing tax increment financing districts.
I like that better because since most of us aren't quite sure about what it was, then exploring it would be a good step. Well, are there people that, how did we do this vote last time? Did we just vote yes or no?
We did a roll call, yeah. So whenever anybody wants to make a vote for it, feel free, but please do so. And we can.
This is Amy. I'm sorry, I can't find the raise my hand button. And I found it last time.
It's in reactions. It took me a hot minute myself.
That's what I thought from last time. Oh, there it is. I apologize. I did a lot of reading on TIFs when we were doing this because I didn't know what they were. And, you know, they seem to have pros and cons on both sides. I would personally feel more comfortable with this if it was establishing a funding source versus TIFs. What I've read on TIFs, I don't think I like them. I think in the immediate they seem to be good, but in the long term they may not necessarily be the best option. So I don't know if anybody else has read into them or not.
So what if we could add to what was written? What if we put explore establishing TIFs and similar funding mechanisms to X, Y, and Z? Would that make you feel a little more comfortable?
Yes.
Jessica, didn't we call the roll? I want to be in the middle. I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the last. So just
That's okay.
mix it up.
And I apologize. I'm trying to see everybody who's here. Christina, Mike, sorry, the cat was eating stuff. Actual funding mechanisms, is that a separate process that has to be voted on and approved either by the people or the council?
Oh, yeah.
The council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That helps me
That's
too.
not something that like the Office of Planning and Zoning could just decide, oh, we're going to do a TIF district. No.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, back when I was working for the city of Annapolis, I wrote legislation to establish a TIF in Annapolis, but I don't know what's happened to that since then, whether or not it actually got implemented or not, but it might be worthwhile if someone wanted to say to explore it, to consider such an option, that we check with Annapolis, which is right down the road, obviously. And the other thing is, I'm looking through here, I just ran off, there's like 3 or 4 economic development programs already in place, like for Mountain Road and what is it, Mountain Road and Fort Smallwood are already in commercial revitalization areas. And my question is, why are we considering a TIF if there's already been at least 2, 3, maybe as many as 4 or 5 economic development programs active in Anne Arundel County? So what's wrong that we need to, what will tax increment financing district do?
I believe what currently exists is different from a TIF district, and this is just a different tool, right? This is just another outlet of a possibility of something that can help create the revitalization in those areas.
Right, I understand that. The point is, we already have multiple programs, so what's wrong? Why aren't these areas redeveloping if they have multiple programs already in place?
If I could jump in.
It's going to be more successful.
Oh, sorry. Our commercial revitalization districts, they are areas that are allowed expanded uses and greater development flexibility. In that definition, it doesn't necessarily have a direct funding mechanism tied to it. So this would just kind of bolster that effort by providing funding.
Do we know where this suggestion came from?
Yeah, with coordination based on what we've heard from the public as well as you guys and the presentation from ACDS, we coordinated with the different agencies to kind of formulate this based on everything we've heard.
Okay, I was just wondering if I forget the name, Anne Arundel County Development Corporation or something like that. Did they have input into this?
Yes, we've sent our recommendations relevant to the economy and business and revitalization to them for their opinion.
Okay, I believe Ritchie Highway and Mountain Road are already commercial revitalization districts, so it's kind of redundant. Can we just, and why are we not putting in other corridors? I don't know if there's a district, I've forgotten now, if there's a district in Arnold. I thought there was a small shopping center that might be eligible.
I've put the commercial revitalization areas from that are in Region 4 on the screen. So those are those three there. They are labeled Area 6, Area 5, and
okay,
Area
yeah.
11.
I'm looking at the words, my bad.
No worries. So we could take out along Ritchie Highway and Mountain Road, or sorry, if they're along Mountain Road, not Ritchie Highway. We could take the Mountain Road out of there. That would, if the group.
Yeah, or else you say, and other commercial revitalization areas. That's more of a technical comment than a policy.
Okay. If there was an area you wanted to add to this list, we're open to suggestions.
I thought there was one down in Arnold. Can you go down the map? Is there any more map?
No, that's it.
For the specific commercial revitalization areas, there might be a different program
Correct.
in Arnold.
But this is right. But this is Pasadena. The map is only of Pasadena. It doesn't go down to Arnold.
Yep, I cut the map off there so you could see a little bit better of where they lay,
Okay.
because there isn't one directly in. There isn't a commercial revitalization area as far as I know.
And Severna Park or Arnold. Okay.
Okay, and that's past the 5-minute mark, but Holly and Bo have their hands up if you want to. You want to continue, or should we call a vote?
Holly and Bo, are you ready to vote, or do you need?
I can vote. I was going to answer a question for John that in reference to most of Severna Park, Arnold area, the infrastructure of both water and sewer already exists. Thus, they don't tend to get the TIFs the same as areas that don't have either sewer or water, as some of those corridors in Pasadena or further down in those areas have. But
I just want to say that Arnold, a lot of Arnold doesn't have sewer.
a lot of commercial Arnold does, but a
Safeway.
lot of non-commercial does not.
No, Safeway has septic as well, so we could use a little more sewer.
So
The Safeway, are you talking about the Arnold Safeway or the Benfield?
Yeah, Arnold. I'm sure Benfield has sewer.
I thought that got updated in the last update.
Well, we do want to move along, so can we hear from Holly? Holly?
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, I would be more inclined to at least stand aside if it's a highway speeding off.
Wait,
Also,
I'm not hearing you very well, Holly.
um, you can't hear me at all?
No, I can hear you now. I can hear that much better. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd be more inclined to stand aside if Ritchie Highway was taken out. Also, I am not loving this format of kind of barreling through with 5 minutes. I don't think that this is going to be a good recommendation if we can't all discuss these topics. I mean, we're all those tools and procedures for a reason. If a motion is on the table, we discuss it. I understand these aren't motions, but these are serious recommendations, and I feel like we're just flying through them to be forced to agree to something that isn't well thought out, and I'm getting a little frustrated with it.
Couldn't we say something like explore incentives for revitalization to promote infill? And I mean, that would include, you could put including TIFs so that we don't, like John was saying, if they already have enough here, we don't put some more on. I think we'd have to have somebody look at the whole thing and know whether we needed TIFs again. So if we make it simpler, would that help, Holly? Take out the names.
So what is your language proposal? And are we still harping about this 5 minute thing? Because I just think it's ridiculous. It's pressured and it's really frustrating at this point.
Well, we were just trying to move it along, but if this one is really, maybe we can come back to it. I was just trying to say, explore financial incentives for revitalization in Region 4, including TIFs, and to promote infill development and redevelopment, as well as transportation improvements. Take out the names and just say that we should look at what incentives exist and what incentives they need. And
What is infill development? Is that increasing density?
Yeah, it can be, depending. I mean, it means that there's an opening there. We've been hearing that all we had was infill development for the last 20 years, but it seems like we keep getting more. So I don't know. We're kind of built out, it seems. But,
Yeah, why are we trying to recommend infill development if we're kind of done with that?
well, this is for revitalization and redevelopment.
Commercial, right?
Correct. This
Yeah,
is
wonderful.
Yeah.
I like the
commercial.
title, don't like development, but that's just me. I'm just nothing. I shut up.
okay. And is there a motion or anything you'd like to move forward with this?
Why don't we call the roll, Jessica, and just see where we are?
So, but wait, so sorry to interrupt. This is Walter. So we're exploring. We're going with commercial revitalization areas, and are we pulling out the word infill? It could be redundant with redevelopment since it's in a commercial
Area.
revitalization area.
So to promote development and redevelopment instead of infill development and redevelopment.
What's the difference between development and redevelopment?
One would be brand new, I guess. I don't know.
While the other one would, yeah, correct.
Redevelopment, yeah, like they said, is typically building on something that was already built as opposed to greenfield development.
Yeah.
And infill is typically if there's a lot that's, say, in between two already developed areas, it would occur there as opposed to on a greenfield that's surrounded by other greenfields.
So I can't imagine that there's too much greenfield in the commercial revitalization areas. So
That's correct. These
Mhm.
areas typically are a little bit more developed already, so it mainly consists of
so maybe
redevelopment.
if the recommendation used redevelopment, would that ease anyone's concerns?
I think it would cover it, but I'm not sure. I mean, I like redevelopment, not going into greenfields the same way. And I don't think commercial development will be going into greenfields, hopefully. So,
And then if you take a look at the areas designated, I don't think there's any greenfields in there.
I
Okay.
see Emma's hand up.
So I'd go for redevelopment.
Yeah, I was just gonna, this is my opinion, if we want to remove infill development for the reason Walter cited as it's redundant, I'm okay with that, but I agree with Holly that I wouldn't be comfortable adding development into it because I prefer emphasizing redevelopment as it's already stated here.
Okay, so what we have as of right now, based on all the comments, is explore establishing a funding mechanism such as a TIF or tax increment financing district in key areas and in the commercial revitalization areas to promote redevelopment as well as transportation improvements. Now, any wordsmithing will be tweaked out between now and the final draft, but overall, the substantive quality of this, that's what we have proposed for the SAC. Is there a motion, or go ahead, Ann?
well, I just think we did take out some of the things that people were uncomfortable with. So I hope we can have a vote just to see where we are.
I agree, Ann. Let's vote.
Okay, we're voting on the language that Eric just read. And so if you're saying aye, you're okay with it. And if you say nay, you're not. So.
All right, just give me 1 second before I start the vote. Sorry, Holly had to, or not Holly, Lori. I just switched which format she was in, and so she's being promoted to a panelist. All right. Now, starting the vote for the strategy as it is re-explored it with the red, starting with Bo,
Aye.
Emma.
Aye.
Is Lauren here tonight? I didn't see her earlier, but I just want to double check. All right, I'm not seeing Lauren here tonight. Lori,
Yes. Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Steve, were you here tonight? I didn't see you earlier.
I think Steve's out of town, but I think he's in Utah. Mhm.
All right, I am not seeing him with us tonight. Shayla,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Ollie,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and Amy.
Aye.
All right, thank you. The ayes have it.
Okay, that's economy strategy number 1. So number 2.
So number 2, blazing right through these. We are going to, it's a very similar, same concept. Again, focus on tools to revitalize certain areas, right? And this one is establish enterprise zones where permitting and business license fees are reduced and waived. To my knowledge, this is something the state of Maryland state of Maryland really works with. It's zones to help revitalize communities, attract businesses, and create jobs is the overall goal of these zones. So again, very similar to the previous one, is to revitalize certain areas to attract jobs and make these areas more commercially used and not vacant.
Well, it's kind of similar to what we did, but it doesn't have some of the stuff we didn't like. So I think it probably is less controversial, I think, but people have other comments.
Holly has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the people that I'm not understanding this at all. Why are we reducing that or waiving business license fees?
You were I couldn't. It sounded very muffled. I couldn't really understand what you were asking.
I believe the question was, why are we waiving business license fees?
Yeah. So again, this is just an incentive to allow when a business owner or a business someone with a business to come into these areas, to incentivize them to come to these areas specifically, because there's a the process to get into these areas is a little easier with these incentives. Does that make sense? Emma has her hand up.
Yeah, just I think I'm another one of the people who said, well, actually I see my comment there, but honestly rereading it, I'm having a little trouble. Like I'm not sure if there's any way we could change it where I would vote yes on it, just because I'm not really comfortable. Like it's such a slippery slope when you start to like make exemptions, especially for businesses. And I just don't know if that's a path we even want to go down. So I would love if someone can tell me like how this addresses that issue this specifically and addresses and like why this is a good idea. I'll change that vote, but right now I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding why we want to include this.
So from my understanding, the state's page, I've done a little bit of reading on their website. This is for the small. This is geared for more local small businesses. This isn't for the big box chains. This isn't for necessarily like, large companies. This is for something for the local community kind of thing, the local business owner to really help get in, kind of get established and help avoid some long processes potentially to get into a brick and mortar type situation. That's my understanding. Maybe I'm incorrect, but that's how I've interpreted whatever.
So I see people I think are probably addressing some of what I asked, but I just wanted to make a wording suggestion that maybe we could include some sort of like accountability piece of making sure that the exemptions aren't misused. I know that sounds silly and simple to include, but I think it's necessary.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. We'll work on that. Walter, you have your hand up?
Thank you. So if I understand it, the enterprise zones are selected according to some criteria, with the intent being we want to attract businesses into these areas that are underutilized. And in order to entice them, the fees that you would otherwise pay to the government, taxes, license fees, are adjusted to create a motivation. And as someone who deals with business license fees and taxes, et cetera, I see a great benefit in reducing the amount of money that's basically your overhead that doesn't go to create your business or serve your customers, but just goes to monitor and well, it's a barrier to entry into commerce. It's money you got to pay the government. So it kind of appeals to my libertarian senses.
Thank you, Walter. And again, it goes back to the local kind of community mindset. This is geared, from my understanding, again, for the more local business owners, the smaller shops, the mom and pop kind of shops.
So this wouldn't be the commercial revitalization area. That would be a separate designation, the enterprise zone.
It could overlap, to my knowledge.
So,
Tom?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I kind of agree with what Emma said originally, and it makes me a little bit nervous as to how broad this is. And there's really no clear definition in this statement that limits it significantly. So I think I would like to see something that can be a little more specific, and I wouldn't mind changing establish to explore as we did in the previous one.
Okay. There's two more hands. I see John and Christina. Christina, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, let me pop in here really fast. So I think if Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation recommended this, this is their business, and they made a recommendation that I think it's very brief for what this is. Because the first thing I think that has to happen is we have to explore and determine which geographical areas could qualify as enterprise zones. And then it's actually something that has to be applied to by the state of Maryland. So we may want to clarify this language a little bit, because I agree with some of the people who have said that it's really too broad. And so, it could be very surgical in nature, where you really only want to apply for the enterprise zone from the state of Maryland in a small area.
John?
Okay, I'll just make this one comment and let it hang for, I don't know how many we get through tonight. But I find myself totally ill-informed on virtually all these economic things. I could handle the transportation, housing, but in this area, I really don't know. And one of the questions that pops out is, well, how much are the license fees? Are they $50, $5,000, $10,000? Depending on the dollar amount, it may not make any difference at all. And I just don't have enough background information to know if something like this would even work. And that's true with many of these things that are going to be under economic.
Thank you, John. Walter, and then this is past the 5-minute mark.
All right,
So,
the beauty of doing this remote. So on my other screen, the Enterprise Zone Tax Credit, which is a Maryland program, Anne Arundel County has Brooklyn Park as the only zone for this Enterprise Zone Tax Credit. So if the definition of Enterprise Zone is going to be similar to the definition that's created under the state program, and being familiar with Brooklyn Park, then I think we can take some solace in the fact that there's a definition and qualification of enterprise zone that is going to afford us some sort of protection here, that this isn't going to result in a big box store not paying any taxes.
thank you, Walter. Okay, Anne or Jesse, it looks like you said you want to have something.
I just wanted to go back to Christina's comment about potentially limiting this to a geographic area. How would people feel about explore establishing enterprise zones where permitting and business license fees are reduced or waived for local businesses in commercial revitalization areas? If you'll recall from our last strategy that we discussed, those were the 3 areas labeled as areas, like 5, 6, and 11. They were along Mountain Road and in Fort Smallwood. And that could be just a little area to try to pilot this for Region 4, if we wanted to try to go in on an area.
Then I get confused again about commercial revitalization areas, which I think are bigger. And I thought they were trying to say something new, like establish, we wanted to explore enterprise zones for smaller areas. That's why we're having trouble, I think. We don't know what the parameters are. Just
Well, and to that note, this goes back to explore establishing, right? This is something that, as Christina said, the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation, this is their job, right? That they're going to go back and if they're going to look into this more and really provide more information and do the through the weeds kind of research, and then they're going to present this and have this get approved if that's the process, right? So this
well,
is just.
I didn't realize we're making it for local business, so that takes it out of the commercial enterprise zone. So I think that makes it a distinct difference, which I appreciate.
Okay, and we are past the 5-minute mark. What would you like to do?
Well, let's call the roll and see how much differences we have. So, but it will be, if you look at the red, it's been changed to explore establishing enterprise zones where permitting and business license fees are reduced or waived for local businesses.
Before we call the roll, I just noticed there's one last hand up. Holly, do you have any last comments?
I just don't think it's a good idea to be taking a vote on something that clearly we needed more information on. It feels like I'm being pushed into a decision without any kind of background knowledge. 5 minutes is not enough to talk about enterprise tax zones. I don't know what that is, and that was not enough information to make a reasonable decision.
Thank you for your comment. Anne, how would you like to proceed?
I would like to go ahead and call the roll and see what our consensus is.
All right. We're going to start with Emma this time. We're voting on the comments as they are in column F with the red changes. So Emma.
I'm just rereading it. Aye.
Okay. Lauren wasn't here today. Lori.
Aye.
Melissa.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Steve. Wasn't here today. Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Polly.
Nay.
John.
John, you were on mute.
My bad. Abstain pending more information.
Gotcha. Anne,
I would say aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and Bo.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to cultural resources. Jesse?
Yes. So our first cultural resource one is to establish an appointed cemetery oversight advisory committee. This one came to us from Cultural Resources. An appointed cemetery oversight advisory committee would help to address some of the issues that we've noticed in our county regarding some of our historic cemeteries. These include things like potentially, sorry, I noticed we've got another Cindy here tonight. Yeah, sorry. It would help to address some of the issues that they've noticed in the county with our historic cemeteries, potentially including what to do about historic cemeteries that might be inundated by water if they're along the coast with our climate change and other issues that are a little bit more high level and would require that input. And so that's their recommendation. I think Eric had maybe a little bit more of a reading from them.
Yeah, so essentially, Jesse hit it right on the head, but these are for cemeteries that are both unowned and unidentified, as well as ones that are identified, and basically to help protect the ones that are greatly endangered from either potential impact or neglect. As they mentioned, there's been a lot of different vandalism and theft of headstones. So ideally, these committees would help kind of just make sure these cemeteries are protected moving forward in almost every aspect of that. So.
Does anybody think this is a terrible idea? I mean, it just sounds rather harmless and potentially needed.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, not that I think it's a bad idea. I think there's a lot to look into with something like this, what the purview of this committee would be and things like that. So I would just recommend that we change establish to explore, similar to what we've done with other recommendations.
Okay, we can absolutely do that. One thing I do want to read from the Cultural Resources Department, or they do say the role of the Cemetery Oversight Committee would be to assist OPZ and the Cultural Resource in reviewing and providing advisory comments on subdivision and site development plans that are adjacent to a cemetery, among other things. But that's black and white right there. So, Tom?
Eric, I think some of the things you said initially about this added some wording that for me would make it a lot more clear as to what the intent of this is, because when you say establish a committee, it doesn't really tell much of anything. So if it had a little bit more of an explanation as to what the goal of the committee is, then I think I could support it.
So explore establishing the committee to protect cemeteries throughout the region, or?
I'm sorry, because I can't remember exactly what you had said initially, and that might have been from wording in some other document, but it more or less was giving some reasoning for establishing this committee instead of saying, let's just do this.
Well, I think if you look, I don't know if you can see, Tom, the issue that historic cemeteries are neglected, in disrepair, and being actively vandalized amid a lack of legal protections. I think it was to explore that problem and see if there could be solutions.
Right. So why wouldn't we put some kind of wording like that in our proposed language?
I've updated the proposed language. You can see it in column F with some other red changes.
Well, I think that's a good job, Jessica. That seems to
Yeah, okay.
tie it
I mean,
together.
I can live with that.
Thank you, Tom. Bo?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the cultural division, which is its own, what division of, is it OPZ or county
It's
executive
a-
office?
No, it's a section within the planning division in the Office of Planning and Zoning.
Okay, and how much do they work with the genealogy society that maintains the records and has, and almost every time out, there's a division seems to weigh in anyway. Like, isn't there already an active process for all of this? We just don't have money to fix it. Is that it?
I think there largely is a capacity issue. And the
Okay.
resources are being lost because there isn't capacity for it.
It's been, volunteers have been doing it. And they need a more structural group in order to maintain integrity of what they say when every development comes within so many yards.
It's not even development. Like some historic cemeteries, maybe they've been abandoned, but they're still there. And sometimes the stones get stolen.
Yeah, no, we
Or
have one in Cape.
yeah, or I think there's one over in Bacon Ridge, and there are mountain bikers going by it very closely. So it's really about trying to do more work towards preserving these historic cemeteries.
Okay, so it's not just with regard to building
It's not
new
only
development
in
or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
about
that's correct.
preserving history. Okay, that answers what I need.
Thank you, Bo. And those are all the hands for this one. So
Well, why don't,
I missed, are you looking for raised hands on this?
oh, if you have a comment, feel free.
Oh, no, I don't, but I didn't know if I missed. Like,
We
is it a
haven't-
hand? Was it the
We haven't
hand
taken the
voters?
vote yet, so
Okay,
didn't miss out on anything.
okay, thanks. I actually, with the cemeteries, I know there's a volunteer group around here that has been doing that. And I don't really, and I used to be involved in DAR, and that was something they did too, but I hadn't thought about that in a while. I realized that wasn't that productive, but
Thank you, Lori.
move on.
well, Jessica, can we
Proceed.
call the roll on this one?
So we're calling the roll for votes on what's in column F with the red. Right now, we're going to start with Lori. Lori,
Aye.
Melissa,
And I see a Q&A from Steve Miller asking to be let into the meeting.
Oh, okay, good.
I think Steve should be a panelist now.
Thank you.
Oh, well, there he is. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Ann.
Steve, while I have you, why don't I just get your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Jayla,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Holly,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Anne,
Hi.
Michael,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bo,
Aye.
and Emma.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
Okay. So now, some of us have dealt with this next one, cultural resources number 2. No, that's cultural resources number 3. Wait a minute, I'm missing. Oh, the demolition by neglect is what I was trying to talk about. Annapolis has a demolition by neglect ordinance, and I think it's been fairly successful. It's for the historic district, and I don't know what list or how they would, roll out an demolition by neglect. I can tell you that, it's good to have it if you can enforce it and have enough people to watch it. But demolition by neglect is a fairly common protection for historic buildings and sites. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, just a little bit more information on demolition by neglect. It's neglect of a building or structure to the point that restoration or rehabilitation is no longer feasible and demolition becomes necessary. So the gist of this is just to provide a code provision that would help to deter that from happening. So I see Emma's hand.
Yeah, sorry if you just explained this and I'm being thick, but I'm confused mostly about how it relates directly to the issue of historic resources and loss of historic integrity. Like, why is this being used specifically to address that issue?
I think I can say that in Annapolis, they found that some owners were just letting the building completely fall apart. And maybe they had an idea they didn't want to take care of it. I don't know how it all started, but demolition by neglect is I think it's used in other states, et cetera, way of protecting things when the owner doesn't seem to be protecting it. So.
That's correct.
Christina?
Yeah, so if you don't have demolition by neglect language, then property owners can allow their buildings to deteriorate to the point that there is no restoration that can bring them back. And so they're actually sidestepping some of the historic requirements. And so demolition by neglect, it requires property owners to properly maintain historical buildings. Just to be very clear.
So sorry, I know I lowered my hand, but it says here it would be to prevent a demolition by neglect.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Then I'm okay.
So demolition by neglect is you've let your building deteriorate so far that there is no other option but to bulldoze it, to eliminate it. And so a demolition by neglect ordinance would say that property owners have to maintain their historic buildings. And if they don't, it's enforceable.
Emma, this is Bo, just real quick. Here on the Broad Neck Peninsula, where there's some historic homes that people like to save with nonprofits, but if a private owner owned it and it's historically registered and they let it neglect and they don't restore it because it costs too much, at that point it can be knocked over and new homes can go up in its spot, and that would be done. I mean, it takes a lot to get there, but it's been tried. Sometimes it fails, but if you had language to protect a 1735 house, that an owner can't just let it go into disrepair to the point that it falls over. That's what it's trying to prevent.
I would agree with that, Bo.
There's a few down here on this end of the Broad Neck Peninsula that have been at that point where families have let it go for 50 years. There's a classic one right next to McDonald's that you can see with the flags hanging off of it these days. But after a fire, it was just left to be there. It's been there another 40 years. The owner would love to save it, but it's so costly, it may not be worth it.
Thank you for explaining that, Bo.
Yep.
Tom?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that comes to mind with this is if a property like this is owned by someone who simply can't afford to do any kind of repairs or to try and restore it in any way, then what happens? How would this law take effect, and what would that mean for that property owner?
Well, not that there's enough money to always go around, but there are grants from the state for historic buildings that need, repair and tender TLC.
Typically, when you buy properties like that, Tom, there's deeds and covenants on the property that you must maintain the historical accuracy to it. It's not something that gets added after that person purchases it. They're required by law to do so, and they're failing their covenant and the deed of the property in order not to maintain it.
Bo, can I give you an example? I don't have a lot of specifics about this, but it seems a few years ago in Severna Park, there was an old house that was a historic Black owned property and it was essentially falling apart and it was torn down. Now, I don't think the people who owned that necessarily at that time had the wherewithal, the financial ability to do anything to improve that property. And that's what I'm questioning here, is so that the wording of whatever proposal might include something that would allow for people who simply can't. I mean, what Ann said has some merit, and possibly they can request help, but a lot of times people don't know that help is out there.
Also, I think we should put this requirement on a particular list. You know, I don't know what the county has on if it's the state historic preservation list, you know, for state buildings, or if we have a county historic list, but it should be, I would think, a listed property, because most historic properties, and if it's not listed, people that are concerned ought to try to get it listed, but this just doesn't say, it just says historic. So
There's the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places, and then there's also the Anne Arundel Inventory of Historic Properties.
okay, so one of those it should be on, I would think.
Yeah, the often I think the ones from Anne Arundel are coordination with the state. And in addition to that, I just want to add that cultural resources is a resource for people, so they do know about these grants. And so if you have a historic property, I served as their secretary, so I know that they do get calls from people who are interested in historic properties, and so they get calls asking what the requirements are for those upkeeps, and they're great at responding to those. And also, I just want to bring to everyone's attention that one of the strategies we previously got consensus on via SurveyMonkey is to expand the historic preservation tax credit, which could also help to alleviate some strain on maintaining these properties.
Can I jump in here for a second, Christina? So just so everybody understands, because Mr. Hampton is concerned about what demolition by neglect might end up looking like and what happens if somebody can't afford it. So any kind of demolition by neglect would have to be a change to the county code, which goes through the legislative process with the county council, which is an open and public process. So all you're recommending right now is that we potentially establish a code provision to address this. Those details get worked out in an open process later on down the line. So I would not get as hung up on all the details, because even if you said, well, I want to make sure that it doesn't include X, we can't guarantee that, because it's not OPZ that would do this. The county council has to approve it.
Thank you, Christina. Holly, and then that's our 5-minute warning, Ann.
So this really speaks to my heart. I mean, I am all about revitalization. Let's make it better. Let's make what we have better. I do worry about I feel like this is a stick versus, like, you got the carrot and the stick, you know, like we really want these houses, these historical homes, to not fall into disrepair. But I mean, if they fall into disrepair because these people can't afford it. And I like the idea. There's someone in here who said something about like grants and some kind of incentives, you know, like let's offer them a carrot versus like, you're going to get punished for not being able to afford upkeep on your home, you know. So that's where I'm concerned, but I really like the I don't know, the idea behind this suggestion, and it is where I want to go, but I just don't want to, you know, punish people for things that they can't afford.
Well, let me just say that most, and I include myself, because I was the president of Historic Annapolis for 8 years, raising money and doing things, and you know, this wouldn't be just somebody walking up to you and trying to say you've broken a law or you've done something. People that are concerned about these properties would have probably gone up to these people before it got quite so dire and said, you know, could we buy it from you perhaps if we're a nonprofit? And, fix it up or do whatever. I think people would be offering solutions, but there are people that just don't want, they want their building to fall down. And that's what this is for, in case it's a very special building and you don't want it to fall down. So, but this is not the kind of thing where people are going around looking at your property and telling you not to let it fall down. I mean, it's targeted to very specific property.
All right, thank you, Ann. That's all the hands. So if you want to move forward with a vote.
Yes,
Okay.
Jessica.
Okay. So this round, we're going to start the vote with Melissa Hagan. We didn't have any revisions to this one that I see, so we're looking at the language in column B this time. Melissa.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Holly.
Aye.
John.
No, there's just too much I don't understand about this.
Anne.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Amy.
Aye.
Bo.
Aye.
Emma.
Aye.
And Lori.
Aye.
All right, thank you. The ayes have it.
Thank you all. And our final cultural resource strategy, Jesse.
Yep, so this one is to have the cultural resources section of the Office of Planning and Zoning work with the Office of Transportation and the Department of Public Works to update the county design manual to include appropriate regulations applicable to designated scenic and historic roads, and to remove the exemption for APF testing for designated roadways. Thanks to some wordsmithing comments that we got via SurveyMonkey, we already have a suggested revision in column F. So that is to consider removing exemptions for APF. And so if you'll recall from our cultural resources presentation, the Scenic and Historic Roads program was intended to have 3 tiers of scenic and historic roads that would have different levels of protections. And in the end, we got 1 level for all of the scenic and historic roads. And so the same requirements are on all of those roads, regardless of how intact their historic integrity is. And so this would allow Cultural Resources, Office of Transportation, and DPW to review the scenic and historic roads and determine if some regulations are still applicable to them. And so that's the gist of it. And as far as the removing the exemption for APF testing for designated roadways, if we switch that to consider removing, that could just be in conjunction with the APF roads group that is currently going through some of those recommendations and are currently reviewing APF requirements and providing recommendations, so they could work with that group to determine if that's appropriate for our scenic and historic roads.
I think this is very much needed. I remember seeing a county council meeting when they were talking about how frequent these roads, or the list of roads is updated, and I think it's not updated much, and it's been sitting there for a while and doesn't have a lot of content. So I think it's a great idea to look at that and try to make it work better. And if it's consider removing testing, I think that I'd like that much better too. Not just saying remove it.
Amy has her hand raised.
So just when you were reading because I came in late, so I didn't see this presentation. So the existing we wanted 3 tiers, but we actually only got 1. So the criteria is same across the board. Is that a state thing or is that a county thing?
I believe that's a county regulation.
Okay. So this is
County.
this is what the county wants, independent of whatever criteria the state has.
And this recommendation would allow for basically a reassessment of these scenic roads. And like Jesse said, everything that's the exact same could potentially go into something that's more adequate and more appropriate for certain roads.
Okay.
Pending their study.
Okay. I wasn't sure state, county, how that was working out there. Sometimes it's a state and then the county comes in and makes things more stringent. So I was trying to figure out if that's what this was.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Amy. John?
As a general rule, I'm opposed to exemptions to APF because there's a reason we came up with those 6 APFs in the first place. But I don't understand, if we're talking about preservation of scenic and historic roads, why the APF would even apply in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess APF, there's a road component, but schools are the biggest single component. So I don't know why. That's a good reason to consider removing it.
So I think, yeah, Christina's hand is up, and I just want to, for clarity, it looks based upon the initial recommendation that historic roads are already exempt. And so we're considering removing that exemption.
Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about scenic and historic roads. I don't want to admit how old I am, but there are a lot of roads all over the state and in the county that are little 2-lane roads. They have lots of hills and lots of turns. And by today's standard, we would never design a road like that. And that's part of the beauty of these roads. And usually they are in rural areas, although not always. So the point of the scenic and historic roads was to have a mechanism to help these roads stay scenic and historic. Okay, here's the problem with one of the big problems that we have. So because we wanted those roads to stay that way, we exempted them from requiring adequate public facilities review when projects happen. So let's say somebody wants to build a 50-lot subdivision on a scenic and historic road. They don't have to do any adequate public facilities studies that may end up triggering the need for road widening, taking out some horizontal site limitations or vertical site limitations. And so then you put the 50-lot subdivision on that road. And now after 5 years, you've had a couple of accidents and maybe somebody got killed. And that community goes back to the county commission or to the county council and they say, we need road upgrades on this road because this road is not safe. And maybe that ends up happening later. So this is a very complicated problem, because you don't necessarily want to build subdivisions or other types of development where the facilities are not adequate, but we have these roads that are, still rural in nature and still have a lot of historic and scenic character that we want to preserve. So I just want to give you all that background in reference to this before you decide you're going to vote.
So this provision would make it that these roads are definitely subject to APF testing.
Yeah, but that also means that they could then, have improvements to support the development that's going in. I think a lot of people think that if it's a scenic and historic road, we can somehow prevent development, and we can't. That is not enough to prevent development. But what happens is we potentially can have development on these roads where you really should have improvement to support the development.
I saw Holly's hand, and I also just want to point out that the map that's included on this one is the map of scenic and historic roads in Region 4 if you wanted to see where they are. And Holly.
So I'm slowly starting to grasp this, but I don't understand what the recommendation is going to do. Is it going to increase density, decrease density? Obviously, it's not that simple, but what is going to be improved with this recommendation? What's the goal of it?
It's going to allow the Office of Transportation and Department of Public Works to provide updated amenities on our scenic and historic roads that they work with cultural resources to determine are applicable for those amenities. So for example, on our feedback maps, people requested potentially sidewalks on St. Margaret's Road. And so cultural resources would be able to look over that road with OT and DPW and determine if that road is the sidewalk is an appropriate amenity for that road. That's just an example.
Based on the previous information, is it likely that those things get approved or not? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Are you talking about the study with cultural resources or the improvements themselves on the roadway?
Well, does that sort of thing typically hold that up when it's a historic road? I guess more often than not, or is this a brand new way of doing it?
So I think that this recommendation just kind of showed is to encourage and work with these departments to complete a study to show reclassification. And then the reclassification will allow, based on what the roadways are classified as, to be able to have certain amenities pending their classification. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, what's an example of the amenities? Maybe that would help.
Yeah, so certain roadways can have like Jesse was saying, sidewalks, while others
Right.
can't. So depending on the classification, so if there's a roadway now that should have a sidewalk, for example, this study may help for that cause.
Okay, even if it's historic, like in the example of St. Margaret's Road or something.
It would come down to the classification of what the roadway would become and what would be allowed on that kind of classification.
Okay.
Christina?
So think about this in terms of one thing that can generally happen with subdivision is that a developer may have to do a decel lane or an accel lane so that there's actually a place where you can pull off and slow down to make your turn, or when you're pulling out that you have an accel lane in order to get up to speed before you merge in. So that requires a road widening. And in a scenic and historic road, like using St. Margaret's as an example, would we want that? That is going to change the character of that scenic and historic roadway. Or if you have to widen the road and add shoulders or sidewalks or bike lanes, any of those things are greatly going to change the character of the roadway. And I do want to point out that Walter asked a question in chat. If the update is required, if the update to the road, so let's say we have an exemption for adequate public facilities, and then we find out later we really need some road upgrades, and the developer is gone. I mean, they've had their approval and everything is done. Then yes, the taxpayers are going to be paying for that, for those upgrades.
So I see there's part of Mountain Road there. Is that correct? On the map?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so let's say in that example, what would determine that, say, sidewalks would negatively affect the character? And I guess that's what I just as a information, what is the criteria on character of the road? Because I would imagine it varies, obviously, with these historic roads, whether they're a little more scenic in places or a little more commercialized in other places, or there's just subdivisions.
That would probably be under the purview of the cultural resources section and would go beyond the scope of just
Yeah,
approving the recommendation. That would be something
Yeah.
that would be followed up in implementation.
yeah. Okay.
I've seen Shayla's hand up for a while.
So I guess kind of going, sorry, all the way back to what Holly was saying, which is basically I'm now, because there's so many sidebars, going back to what we were looking at, what we'll be voting on. Is this just essentially delaying the inevitable by adding the step of actually encouraging developers to take a look at the roads as they exist and just kind of advising them on what their limitations will be? But like we're all saying, it doesn't really stop the development. It's just more or
Yeah, I
less
kind of
something for
wondered
them
that
to take
too.
into consideration. So that's what I'm wondering, like, are we just trying to slow them down so they take that into consideration as they are building? Like, I'm getting lost on what we're voting on again.
Thanks. Me too.
It's my understanding that this strategy would allow cultural resources to review our scenic and historic roads and determine if there are appropriate regulations on them. So, for example, like Christina said, with the potentially it needs an XL or a decel lane. And so it's a scenic and historic road, it needs this XL lane. How much would it impact the historic integrity of the road as it remains today? And so that's what we're voting on. The determination of that would be determined by the cultural resources section.
And their determination would go through the legislative process through council. It's not gonna just happen because they say so. It's got to go through the public process as well. So again, this is not anything legislative. This is just that we as Region 4 would recommend this study occur, kind of thing. And we're past our time, but there are Melissa and Kevin have their hands up.
Well, let's go ahead and let Melissa and Kevin have some time.
I just want to say really quickly, I live right near St. Margaret's Road, and there is often bumper to bumper traffic there. So if we're talking about the historic character, that's already gone. So I would rather live near a safe road, you know, that was designed for modern traffic. That's all.
Thanks, Melissa. Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Eric, maybe you can give me correction if needed, but I think some of the discussion has been around what roads are scenic and historic and how that list is prepared and whatnot. I think recommendations 7 and 8 covered that. And my guess is, since we're not discussing them, they had consensus. So I just want to draw everyone's attention to that. Those were recommendations that we already had consensus on, and they would direct OPZ to review the list of scenic and historic roads and what criteria is needed to make that designation.
That's correct. Yeah, so
are you ready for a vote?
yeah, assuming you guys are, yeah.
So Jessica, call the roll again, please.
Yep, we're going to start with Kevin this time. And as a reminder, we're looking at the language in column F. Kevin.
Aye.
Tom.
Nay.
Steve. Is
Steve,
Steve still with us?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you,
Aye.
Steve. Okay, thank you.
Aye. Good.
Got it. Thank you.
Gotcha. Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Holly. Holly.
I'm sorry, I need to read it one more time. Unless you want to read it loud, but I just need to look at it one more time. You can move on and come to me at the end, please.
Yes. John.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Amy.
Aye.
Bo.
Aye.
Emma.
Aye.
Lauren. Oh, Lauren's not here tonight. Lori.
Aye.
And Melissa.
Aye.
And Holly.
And yep, circling back to Holly.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the natural environment recommendation. This recommendation is to implement recommendations of the U.S. Navy, City of Annapolis, Anne Arundel County Military Installation Resilience Review. This is a study that is currently ongoing, and you can look on their website for additional information. But the recommendations have not been produced yet. I know that was a question we had, as well as this is something that would help with reduce the impacts of the sea level rise around the Navy Annapolis area, as well as that portion of Region 4. Jesse, did you want to add anything to that?
I dropped a link in the chat so people can see the website from the City of Annapolis. And if you scroll to the bottom, it does let you know that this study is currently underway and they're in the conduct a shared vulnerability and risk assessment phase. So it seems as though they've just begun.
Well, since it's not finished yet, we don't know what it says. Couldn't we say consider implementation?
Please.
Of X, Y, and Z, you know?
We sure could.
Absolutely. And that sounds like, and I'm not trying to put words in my mouth, but this was one person shy of having consensus already. So I think maybe that consider may help put people over the edge. Bo, I know your hand is still up if you want to continue with your comment.
I was just, please put in there consider, because right now you have no idea what the recommendations will be, and there should be nothing that I would vote for. We would say implement what they say. There could be good things and or bad things or costly things that obviously require years of financing with the federal government that you just don't know the implications of. I can't get behind anything that says implement on something that's currently being studied.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Bo.
You ready
Steve?
for a roll call? Oh,
Oh,
Steve. Sorry. Steve.
Yeah, I'm being redundant here. I'd just echo what Bo had to say, because I certainly didn't know enough about what this study was, and I was surprised that we were endorsing something that was mostly a Navy issue, and I wasn't aware that they were part of our region. So I'm for it now.
Thanks, Steve.
With the change.
Sure. All right, Ann, that's all the hands.
Let's have a roll call. Jessica?
It looks like we got one more hand up there. Holly?
I know it's wordsmithing, but could we just put consider recommendations instead of consider implementing them? Because if the study's not done yet, what? Like just if we could take out the implementing part, just consider.
Any other last minute comments and suggestions before we take the roll call? All right, seeing no movement, we're going to start with Tom Hampton this time, and we're going to be looking at the language in column F. Consider recommendations of the U.S. Navy, City of Annapolis, Anne Arundel County Military Installation Resilience Review. All right. Thanks, Tom. Steve?
Aye.
Walter?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I skipped Shayla by accident. Shayla?
Aye.
Holly?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Bo?
Aye.
Emma?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And the ayes have it. Oh, did I skip Kevin?
Yeah, you need to go back and get him.
You did. That's okay. Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
So I just want to point out that Jesse is recording all of these votes in a big spreadsheet that has calculations at the bottom on the percentages. So it's all being taken down.
Yeah, that was part of the reason I skipped Kevin, is because I was moving.
He was
people-
at the
I was
top.
Yep, I was moving the list around and then the calculations were getting messed up. So I thought I could do it my own this time, but apparently not.
All right,
right.
the next recommendation we have for the natural environment is to provide incentives such as density bonuses for redevelopment projects that manage stormwater quality and quality above county code requirements. We've gone ahead and removed the such as density bonuses based on the comments we've heard already. But this is essentially, the incentives could mean a lot of different things, not just financial incentives. We want to be clear with that. This could also mean maybe parking reduction requirements. If a development were to come in and need 100 parking requirement or 100 parking spots, maybe an incentive could be reduce it to 85 parking spaces instead, or something along those lines. Not just, it doesn't have to be a financial incentive, and it doesn't have to be a density bonus either. And again, we've heard a lot about ensuring water quality and making sure that, you know, the environment's protected. This is something that we're trying to do through development that will occur to help make people go above and beyond certain quality levels and provide incentives for them to do so. Bo?
And this would
Oh.
have to be regulatory. Like, we wouldn't just create a policy document for this. It would have to be codified through the legislative process with the county council.
Thanks, Christina. Bo?
That actually answered my question. Thank you, Christina.
Holly?
Sorry, have we defined redevelopment, or I just want to make sure there's not going to be room for, I don't know, getting around it or something. I just want to know what redevelopment means when we're recommending it. Just want to double check.
So redevelopment is defined in our stormwater management code, and it's specifically for sites that have already been developed and they're going to be redevelopment. So maybe they're going to knock everything down, or they're going to knock part of some things down. And in general, those sites may have been developed prior to stormwater regulations existing in the state of Maryland. So now we're trying to actually have them provide stormwater that meets the Maryland standards for redevelopment. So these are very tightly defined terms in the state of Maryland, and then they apply down to the counties.
So when you say redevelopment, does that mean if it's a house that knocked down and they're putting in like an apartment complex of
yes
50 units, we
Yeah.
could be supporting this?
No,
Interesting.
you're not supporting
Or not
the
okay, sorry. I
redevelopment
understand,
of a site from a house
Right.
to apartments. But what you're saying is that so a lot of times, so let's say I want to use maybe a commercial site. So let's say you have an old strip center that was developed in 1955 and it's now underutilized and some of the stores are vacant. That is a site that could be ripe for redevelopment. And because it was developed in 1955, there isn't any stormwater management. So when all the rain hits the rooftop and the parking lot, it's just going into whatever stream is closest to that piece of property. So when we talk about redevelopment projects, they do have to provide stormwater at the redevelopment standards that we have defined in our code. And so what we're saying is that we might want to provide incentives for the developers to even go beyond what the regulations require. But that does not mean you're supporting a specific project.
No, I didn't mean to say it like that. I'm sorry. It's in my head, but sometimes it slips. But so just, you know what? I'll raise my hand again after I get my thoughts together. But thank you for the clarification.
Thank you both. John or Jesse, did you want to say something? Or John?
Yes. So if we're providing additional above the current I'm not saying this very well either. Will this increase the cost to the developer, to the development? In other words, does this affect affordable housing?
Well, it would be an incentive program, so the developer could choose whether or not they wanted to use it or not. And generally, you try and provide incentives to offset cost.
Okay, I hear you. Okay.
All right, thank you. And as of now, there's no additional hands.
Are you finished, Holly? Do we need to come back to you, or? I thought
I'm
she.
sorry, I'm just, it feels like there's going to be a workaround with this recommendation, and I don't know. So I'm still like, please call on me last for the vote too, because I'm just need to process this.
Remember that if
always
this
abstain.
if this goes into effect, it would have to be a county council, change, wouldn't it, Christina? I mean,
Legislative through the county
legislative change.
council with that vetting process where.
I'm sure by then they would have which kind of incentives they're talking about. If they
Oh,
had
yeah.
density bonuses, I wouldn't be as interested in it, but if they have other things, it might be like gold stars or something. No, I'm kidding, but I think that it's going to have a lot more vetting than just us, for sure. So if you take out density bonuses, then I'm much happier with it.
So what we have right now is provide incentives for redevelopment projects that manage stormwater quantity and control, or quantity and quality above county code requirements.
Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Jessica? Let's call the roll. Jessica?
All right, we're going to start with Steve this time. And just a reminder, we're going for column F with the updated language that Eric just read to us. So Steve.
Aye.
Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
You were muted, Walter. Sorry.
Sorry. Aye.
John.
Did you say Tom?
I said John, but we could skip to
John.
Tom.
I thought you said Tom also.
Let's go for Tom then, and then I'll come back to John.
Aye for Tom.
All right, John.
John.
I'm sorry, was that an aye?
That's an aye.
Thank you. Anne.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Amy.
Aye.
Bo.
Aye.
Emma.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Melissa.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
And Holly.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
Okay, so we've completed all of the new non-transportation housing recommendations. So congratulations, everybody. We're moving forward. So to revisit the transportation strategy we talked about already from last meeting, is to invest in multimodal transit improvements in Region 4, specifically along Ritchie Highway, Mountain Road, College Parkway, and near Anne Arundel Community College. So just kind of for clarification, this doesn't say any new development. This doesn't say anything necessarily that we're recommending new massive properties, but this is saying if there are improvements that are needed along Ritchie Highway or any of these other roads in Region 4, that this Region 4 SAC recommends to improve that. So if roadways need to be repaved, or if there's sidewalks that need to be refitted, or sidewalks that need to be implemented, or any types of bus transit, or potentially bike lanes, anything like that, that's all this is really kind of saying.
I know Arnold Preservation Council has been trying to get bus stops that have some kind of, protection from the elements, and it's just been hard, very hard. So I would be for this, and I would put having some place to be out of the rain while you're waiting, and maybe place to sit would be good. Just my opinion.
John? Oh, you're muted, John.
Sorry about that. Would this allow sidewalks along Mountain Road then that are not currently there?
This is just saying, if a study were to be done that would show that sidewalks should be there, then this would reinforce that opinion. This isn't saying to put sidewalks anywhere. This is just saying if there's any improvements that are subject to be placed in these areas, the Region 4 SAC and Region 4 plan would recommend implementing those recommendations.
Yeah, I'm looking for sidewalks. Thank you.
Holly?
I worry a little bit about the language and what it's saying versus what it means. Could we change invest to consider, maybe?
You can
we go explore instead?
Yeah, I think I like explore even better. Yeah.
So explore multimodal transportation improvements in Region 4, X, Y, and Z.
Or explore investments in multimodal transit.
Okay.
Ooh,
Okay.
yeah.
So explore investments in multimodal transportation. Perfect. Okay. Steve?
Yeah, so Eric, one of the issues that I had with this one is that if you take a look at all of the different items that we have with transportation, I mean, there's so many things right now in the transportation section of the GDP. We've also got the functional plan, the move it. We've got the walk and roll plan. And so there are just a whole lot of strategies out there right now competing for priorities. This is one of the few that actually pertains to Region 4. It's not a broad strategy. And so my question was, are we putting this up higher than most of the other strategies that we've talked about because it is of particular interest, specific interest to Region 4? And to Ann's point, you know, the APC has an interest out there, but did this come from surveys? Did it, all the effort that we tried to pull information and inputs from in the public? I just wanted to know that if this is really one of those strategies that we need to push, that we make it clear.
So
and
yes,
we strongly endorse this.
So yes, this is a accumulation of a bunch of things from I mean, I don't know how many meetings we've sat through in person and virtual where a member of the public have talked about I would like a better crosswalk here or a better sidewalk connection here. And we have the feedback maps, we've had the visual survey preference, and everything combined where anybody dropped a pin or made a comment about anything along these areas. These were the areas of focus that really was a lot, right? So that combined with everything we've heard created this recommendation for you guys to discuss and deliberate. And you're right about all these other plans that talk about other recommendations, the walk and roll, the move it. This is just essentially saying like we really encourage those recommendations to be implemented in Region 4 based on our conversations and everything like that. So Steve, I saw your hand went back up.
Well, I'm just saying, so we know that at least in the GDP, there were short-term, midterm, and long-term priorities. I would assume that we're putting this as a short-term priority, that this is something that we want done sooner than later.
Yeah, I think this is kind of, I think they're all kind of ongoing things. Like, as you see, like they're not really, some may be more long-term, but I think this is something that's always continuous, right? We always want to invest in improvements in the region, in the Ritchie Highway. We don't want to sit here for 50 years and see Ritchie Highway go to rubble and not do anything about it, right? So this is just saying we want to make sure these roadways and these thoroughfares are, if there's an opportunity to invest in these areas on these roadways for multimodal transportation, we want to do it.
I'll also add, if this is one that everyone feels particularly strongly about, we could always find a way to call it out in the region plans to really try to emphasize it. I see Holly's hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. Aren't Ritchie Highway and Mountain Road, aren't they state roads? So if they're state roads, I'm confused about this recommendation.
Correct, but this isn't saying that. Again, and the SAC is not saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z on these roads. We just want to encourage investments and have these roadways maintained properly and maintained and have the work with agencies and work with different departments and on the state level, local level to make sure these roadways are, as multimodal friendly as possible.
So what does a county investment on a state road look like?
I mean, that'd be coordination between the OOT and potentially DBW and the state to determine what they do behind the scenes. Like who's doing what exactly. I can't speak to that. I think maybe go ahead, Christina. I saw your hand
Yeah.
popped up.
Just advocating correctly.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens in every county in Maryland is that they do an annual transportation letter that goes to Maryland Department of Transportation, and it identifies all the county funding priorities, but it's a short list because I mean, we have a massive list for state roads that improvements that we'd like to see across the county. So the more times in plans that we say we need something to happen, the better off we are for getting that into the priority letter that we send to MDOT every year. So I do think at this level, it is important, if you all think this needs to happen, to put it in this plan. That, from having done this a number of decades, that would be my recommendation. But Holly is right. The state is the one that's going to do funding for most of the state road projects. There may be times when the county wants to jump priorities and they say, okay, we will provide some funding for this improvement. But in general, the state does have jurisdiction over doing improvements on their state roads.
Thanks, Christina. And that's past the 5 minutes, but Melissa and John have their hands up. So we'll go through them.
Sure.
Melissa?
I just would like to see stronger language, like instead of using explore investments, it just, I don't know what the word is, highly encourage, and something about regional efforts to improve transportation in Region 4. We have a huge traffic problem where I am, and this is a 20-year plan. We don't want to just spend the next 20 years exploring. We want to actually make some changes.
All right, thank you, Melissa. John?
I'm with Melissa and a few of the others. I would like to see strong language. In fact, I would go back to the original one, invest in multimodal transit improvements. What you're talking about when you say multimodal is transit, bikeways, sidewalks, and believe it or not, automobiles and trucks. All of that should be considered. And as Christina said, we have to work through the state on that. It might be a little bit of county funding, but most likely it'll be close to 100% state and federal funding.
Would people like to go back to invest in multimodal? Seems like more people want to be, rather than explore, be more proactive than explore. Would invest what we had before in multimodal improvements.
And if you would like, we could do invest first, and if that doesn't pass, we could do the explore.
Okay.
If that works for you.
Right. Sure, why not? But
Okay.
we still have more questions.
Yeah, so John, Walter, and then Holly.
Oh, I've gone.
Okay, then Walter, then Holly.
Thank you. Yeah, I would support stronger language. And another thing, just to throw it out there, it seems like we've taken a lot of strong language recommendations and brought them back down to the equivalent of a study bill. And I understand that's a way to get consensus. But I think that it would probably be good if we had strong recommendations out of the work that we're doing, as opposed to just requests that people take a look at things. I would support stronger language for this.
Thanks, Walter. Holly?
So the reason I wanted to explore instead of invest was because I was cautious about what multimodal transportation improvement would look like if someone could twist it around and make it defined as something that we didn't intend it to be. So that's why I didn't want I'm just explaining why I had wanted the word change, because if we said invest in multimodal transportation and it's like, we're asking for high-speed trains on, Route 2, and my name's on that, versus like invest, like, are we talking about sidewalks? Because absolutely, or whatever, like there are things I definitely want, but then there's other things so it's so vague that it concerns me to use stronger language on something, on a recommendation that's vague too, if that makes any sense.
All right, thank you, Holly. And Bo's hand just went up, and then we can vote if you'd like.
Sure.
Bo?
Yeah, it's just, my concern goes back to what John just said. It's not just sidewalks and bike lanes, but it also includes expanding highways for trucks and cars. So, if we invest, we may be saying at the same time, if we're not exploring, is put the money to it, expand the roadways, bring more to us, which many of us down on the Broadneck Peninsula don't want when it comes to Route 50, which is going to be shoved down our throats. And, we're just suggesting go ahead and coordinate more and more wide open lanes on 2 and 179 and other areas to allow traffic to get to the Bay Bridge. That's where I caution the Explorer versus the other.
Thanks, Bo. Okay, Anne, if it's all right with you, then we'll vote. And the first one we'll vote on, I'll read it out loud in a minute, but it'll start with invest, and then we'll go to the Explore if that does not get consensus. So the first one, for the next vote, the recommendation is invest in multimodal transportation improvements and regional transportation efforts in Region 4, specifically along Ritchie Highway, Mountain Road, College Parkway, and near Anne Arundel Community College. Again, some wordsmithing comments we'll take in consideration, but this is for the substantive character of the recommendation.
All right, before we take the vote, I noticed Melissa's hand went up.
I'm just wondering if we could have one language change, which is regional transit, maybe. For the first one, invest in multimodal transportation improvements and regional transit efforts. Does that, so that's like not roadways, but more transit. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but.
Well, I think it first said multimodal transit improvements, which wouldn't really be road building, would it? I don't think.
It would limit the scope. Transit typically pertains to like buses, whereas multimodal transportation is more of like we've been discussing, bikes, walking, roadways, transit. And so that was just an oversight that it said multimodal transit, because multimodal transportation is more broad than just transit.
So I guess I'm thinking regional transit efforts, like thinking that the buses are a more of a regional thing, but I don't know, whatever.
And for that clarification, we can come back with that. But again, overall, this is for the substantive nature of the recommendation. Any tweaks like that can be will be revisited. You guys will have an opportunity to revisit that later.
Okay.
So does that mean we put off a vote, or we're going to vote on invest first? Or
yeah, still voting on the invest one that we just read.
There's one more hand up, but I want to clear before we do the vote. Holly?
Yeah, I am completely against this language change, because I think it could be investing in high-speed buses or trains or whatever, the way it's written. I also am a little disappointed because we did talk about explore investments in that language for the majority of this conversation. And now we're voting on invest first. If I could request, please, to vote on the explore recommendation first. And if that doesn't pass, then go to the invest. That's my request.
And how would you like to proceed?
Oh dear. Well, let's go with what we said we would do, which is we'll start with invest and then we'll see where we are and we'll go to explore if we don't get invest.
Again, thank you, Anna. So again, the recommendation we are voting on first is invest in multimodal transportation improvements in regional transportation efforts in Region 4, specifically along Ritchie Highway, Mountain Road, College Parkway, and near Anne Arundel Community College.
All right, we're gonna start with Shayla. Before we start, just one more time, we're looking at cell F5. It's highlighted, it's surrounded in red right now. Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Holly.
Nay.
John.
Aye for invest.
Anne.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Amy.
Aye.
Bo.
Nay.
Emma.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Melissa.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Tom.
Nay.
Steve.
Aye.
All right, it looks like our eyes have it.
Okay, so we will
well,
move.
we're getting close to 8 o'clock. How do we want to plan the next activity? I mean, should we go on to, I think this affordable workforce housing and changing APF or eliminating APF is going to be controversial.
And we do have one more transportation one.
Okay, let's do that.
And then, this was discussed last time as well. So there was a little bit of communication. This is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So the recommendation is plan for a countywide network of electric vehicle charging infrastructure to create standards for acquiring EV charging stations and amend zoning ordinance to require EV infrastructure for mixed use, medium to high density residential projects, and certain commercial uses. Specify requirements for setbacks, landscaping, and location, as well as develop a program to prioritize locations for installation of EV infrastructure in public spaces and seek funding opportunities for their deployment. This could include county fleet of operations, EV water vehicles, e-bikes, and private single occupancy vehicles. Again, just for clarification, this is something that would also have to be codified by the county council. This is not something that would be just implemented through any types of OPZ or OOT process. This would have to be, again, go through a public process and through the county council. Are there any comments?
It's really long, isn't it? Compared to some of our other strategies.
I'm wondering if there's a way that we can incorporate the proposed language from the January 9th meeting. Because I remember that being a common comment, and I think it might, it looks like the percent of SAC members, sorry, not opposing, it looks like we were one off on this one too. So I just think if we include those, maybe we get more consensus, but what do I know?
No, I think that's a fair point, Emma. So yes, you're right. We were one person off initially, and if we were to swap out requiring with incentivizing, does that change anybody's no to a yes or a no to a stand aside at least?
Can you say the wording again?
Yeah, it would be create standards for incentivizing EV charging stations instead of requiring EV charging stations.
I like that.
And just to go through them, so somebody commented it is long. So part A focuses on specific high density residential and mixed use spaces to incentivize having electric vehicle charging stations. Then part B is for the county to develop a program to look for locations that could be a priority for installing EV infrastructure. And then C is that part that's focused a little bit more on our county fleet, which includes seeking funding opportunities for deploying the EV infrastructure or other electric modes of transportation.
Are we ready to vote?
Michael has his hand up.
Okay.
Just one in that A, there's the require, maybe change that encourage. Where did I see that? Yeah, ordinance to require EV infrastructure for mixed use. So you're incentivizing, but you're requiring it. So we need to change
Okay.
require.
I see what you mean. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Emma?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the other recommendation, the considering focus on county fleet and county owned infrastructure rather than private development. This might make it longer, but is there a way we could add that as like a D, or is there a way that we could blend that in with other parts of it, or am I overthinking it?
We could incorporate that into B, in my opinion, develop a program to identify locations for installation of EV infrastructure in public spaces, prioritize county-owned locations.
So let me just interrupt here. It's Christina. The transition to hybrid and zero emission county vehicles has already been codified in county code. It's in Article 8, Section 2-122. And this section applies to the procurement of passenger vehicles, multi-purpose passenger vehicles, and trucks with a load capacity of 3/4 ton or less. And it talks about replacement of county vehicles beginning on February 28, 2021. So that's already underway. And that's why I like C in here, which is seek funding, because the county is already on the hook for it for their fleet. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thanks, Christina. And Emma, I saw you put your hand on. Do you have any more comments you want to make?
No, I like Jessica's suggestion for the prioritize county fleet and county owned infrastructure just to be safe.
Thank you, Emma. John?
I just wanted to, well, specify incentives for setbacks. I mean, that's basic bulk regulation, isn't it? Wouldn't we do that anyway? So I'm not sure about the second incentive, but I would go back to, are we all focusing that we would require the installation of EV in those 3 zoning categories? And are we all okay with that? How would the mandate work?
It would have to be codified, which would be legislation getting adopted through the county council.
Any more comments or questions on the strategy? I see Kevin's hand up.
Yeah, just a point. I mean, just clarification. We've utilized incentive throughout this entire recommendation, except for when it comes to requiring the code revision itself. Is that intentional, or feels like we were moving towards an overall incentive program? So in the second line under A, EV charging stations and amend the zoning code to require EV infrastructure? Should that not be incentivize EV infrastructure?
Were there more requires?
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was making a joke. Were there more requires than I originally saw? But no, I see this one now. So create standards for incentivizing EV charging stations and amend the zoning ordinance to encourage EV infrastructure for mixed use, medium to high density residential projects and certain commercial uses. Specify incentives for setbacks, landscaping, and location.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you for catching everywhere that I missed them.
All right, and there are no more hands up? Or no?
Then let's go for the vote, Jessica. Call the roll.
All right. I'm going to start the roll with Walter this time. And as a reminder, we're looking at cell F5. It's surrounded by a red box and it's got the changes in red.
Aye.
All right. Walter.
Aye.
Polly.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Amy.
Nay.
Bo.
I can live with it. Aye.
Emma.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Melissa.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Tom.
Nay.
Shayla.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Just double checking my spreadsheet. Oh. All right, the ayes have it.
Okay, thank you. Anne, that
Sure.
wraps up everything but the housing.
Yeah.
So we have about 12 housing to go through. I know it's past time. We can either continue on or we can wrap up and continue this on the February 13th meeting.
I have to leave. I'm not available.
Okay, well, I think this has been, a rather lengthy session. Nobody's been able to stand up yet and do anything. I would rather, and I would like everybody maybe to read these twice or three times before the next meeting, because I think there are an awful lot of incentives that are going to push the school capacity issue. And there's going to be a real, push and pull between the two things of incentivizing more affordable housing, but getting rid of or limiting school capacity considerations. So I'm concerned particularly about 11, but I think we've done well and we should declare victory. What about that?
Eric, could you send out that housing provision that we have to address next time so we can think about it a little more?
Yeah, so I'll send out the remaining, I think 12 recs. They're part of everything I sent already, but I'll simplify it. I'll simplify it, but yeah, I will send that out. But yeah, and just to echo Ann, please review them ahead of time, multiple times, so we can just make sure we're efficient. Because if we need an additional meeting next time, then we're adding into our schedule now.
So for the meeting on the February 13th, we will be finishing, or we will be taking up the housing again and trying to get to consensus on all of those housing issues. Is that all we
Correct.
have to do?
There are 12, yes, that's all.
Okay,
Christina?
okay.
Yeah, Eric, I'm going to make a recommendation. For the housing recommendations, like for instance, if ACDS had recommended some of them, I would say let's get a couple sentences from them in support of, explaining why, because the way the meeting is going, OPZ is basically having to explain what some of the other groups want, and that's difficult. But if we can provide them a little additional data, it may help and remind the agencies that, they need to put this in terms that people can understand, and even provide a link For instance, like the enterprise zones. Okay,
Absolutely.
That, Christina, I think that'll really be helpful.
yeah, I do too.
So, anything else before we adjourn? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, if you're really, I mean, I'm kidding. With the position. I don't think you're gonna be fighting about that. So looks like
Unanimous.
we're adjourned. So, thank you all.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you all.
Kind
Have a
of
good night.
hard work, but I think we really got through it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Bye.